Hello all, welcome to the walkthrough of my sweater grading. So for those of you who've been following along, you'll have read the last 4 blog posts on my sweater. For those of you who haven't, this might seem a little bit of a strange blog post. I'm going to link below to the earlier blog posts so that you can see kind of how the sweater design kind of evolved before I went to the spreadsheet. So first things first is that because this is my very first sweater design, I had to create a women's sizing chart before I started the sweater. I used a combination of 2 sources. I used Gisalda's sizing sheet, which I'll link below as well, and the more general Craft Council of America, I believe, sizing. I searched high and low for some really comprehensive sizing, and it's a tricky one. So Yasalda's is definitely one of the most comprehensive I could find, and I am really pleased with it. So what I did was you have all the different parts of the body. You have a description of what that is, and then for me, this is a note to myself: did I use the standard one? Did I use Yasalda's? And in some cases, I've kept both. So here, for example, these are the upper arms. These are the measurements that they believe them to be. And as I go along, I'll decide, if I want certain types of fit, I'll use one size versus another. I'll probably err on the side of using a solidus, to be fair. Um, I have all of those from a 30-inch bust all the way to a 64-inch bust. Over time, I may do more sizes. If I decide that, I can add them onto the spreadsheet. I use inches throughout, and then convert after I've done the pattern grade into centimeters. Now, I don't know if that's the right way, but I know that my brain works better in inches. I think it's from being raised in Ireland in both metric and imperial, and then coming here and using imperial. It's such a funny thing. And then living a few months in the US twice, it's really funny. And then obviously patterns in Ravelry are a mix. So I have no idea how tall I am in centimeters, or what weight I am in kilos, but I can, I know what a meter is. It's very funny. Anyway, rambling. So I would recommend getting one of these. You'll need one for women's, for men's, for unisex, for kids, socks, gloves, hats, well, heads, depending on what you're making. So this is mine for garments for now, and I'll probably work on it and change it as time goes on. So then what I did was I created a spreadsheet for my specific garment, and I plan to use this spreadsheet over and over again and just add new spreadsheets for every design that I'm doing. So this design is the DK sweater. I'm going to show you as well so that you can see it, that this is the schematic that goes with it. Now, I know that for you for graphic designers, the fact that I do my schematics in PowerPoint probably break your heart, but I am not an artist, so I use the tool I'm best at. In the same way that I use Excel, is that I've used Excel before. You do not have to be a mathematician. You just need to be able to work out how you knit from one place to another in increases and decreases. But being able to use a spreadsheet tool saves you time, I think, and I would recommend you have a look at it. There are some great Excel courses online. There's also some open source spreadsheet tools as well, so you don't have to pay for Excel. So there's lots of options there. So what I did was the first thing I did was I added the sizes. I have a wider variety of sizes that you can see that I have calculated all the way down as well. And that's one of the great advantages of a spreadsheet, is that you're pulling your formulas, which I'll show you in a minute, across the rows and using them for the sizes. I didn't take those any further because I thought the difference in them wasn't enough. So for example, they're very close in size. There's only 4 stitches of a difference. And again, it was similar along here. They're very close in size. So there was no point in doing sizes in those. You could pick one on either side, and I'll talk about the final sizing in the pattern and how people would be best suited to pick them. It's one with a lot of ease. If I was doing something with no ease, so a very, very fitted cardigan, I would probably do the wider range of sizes. So I then put in my gauge, which is my stitches and my rows, and you'll have seen I calculated that much earlier in the design process, because you really need that way before you get to this point, when you're drawing out the designs and the kind of working out in inches where things are happening in your diagram. There are different features of Excel. So for example, I've named the stitches and I've named this rows. You can name your columns, or you can just leave them as, say, D2, which is the cell reference for that. Again, it's how familiar you are with the tool. So then the first thing I wanted to do, because I knew I was aiming for this. Now this has been, I updated the schematic after I had done all the math, so it's a little bit proportionate, but you do know what you're aiming for. I knew what I was aiming for before I started the spreadsheet. I knew I was casting on, knitting straight for a while, increasing a certain distance, and then I had a certain type of neck, etc. So that's that. And then I knew I was knitting it from the bottom to the top with shaping. So I knew I needed a cast on edge. I knew also at this point I was doing it flat, so I knew it would be half the measurements in some cases. So I divided it into sections then as to what I wanted to happen. So I had my casting on my stitches, my knitting straight for a certain amount, and my rib, and then my stocking stitch piece. My increasing section, so from here to there, I knew I had to do a certain amount of increases to a certain depth, and then I knew I had to knit straight for a period. So that's my increasing section. And then I'll cover all of that, because that's actually where the work I found was in that section where I was working out how long everything had to be, how many stitches, how many rows, etc. And then I did my sleeves, which is this piece here. So I had to use a particular measurement for that. And then I had to do my neck calculation. I don't know if I would, I worked that out as something that made sense to me, having looked at other grading spreadsheets that are available online. So for example, I imagine if I was doing a straight top, I'd have said, right, I'd have done a cast on and I wanted to go straight to the armhole. So I'd have gone all the way to the armhole. And then if I wanted to put a regular armhole, I'd have gone in a bit for an armhole shaping and put a regular armhole. If I'd wanted it to be a raglan, I'd have worked out kind of increasing and decreasing in the different ways. So it'll all depend. The sections you will be working out depend on the type of garment that you're designing. Yes, so with that said, I then worked out my cast on stitches was the first thing. I felt really pleased with this actually, because this was like, oh, so this might actually work. So I knew that I was using the half of the full hip measurement, because I was knitting this flat. I found that measurement, so for a 30-inch bust, that measurement, the full hip is 32, half of it is 16. I used that from F6 in my sizing guide, so F6. And this is why Excel is very useful, in that I can then pull those formulas across, and it brings across the right numbers for my sizes. Now, part of the reason I included the sizes as well is that it allowed me to just copy and paste that formula all the way across, and then I could hide the sizes that I didn't want. So that was something I found useful, and I would probably do again, is put in all the sizes, work them out, and then take out the ones that you're not going to include in the final version of the pattern. So you can see I have the full sizes worked out in those hidden ones, but I haven't worked out the centimeters because I didn't include them in the final version. So that was the first thing I did, and then I have it in, that's my inches and my centimeters. I then worked out the number of stitches. That number is based on stitches per inch from my gauge versus multiplied by the number of inches that I'm trying to cast on, which gives me 88 stitches. And then I'm able to pull that across the formula. When I say pull it across, I mean you could actually do this, because Excel is a magical tool that would fit in your formulas across like that. But also you can copy and paste them as if you were just copying the formulas. So my next thing then was I wanted a 2x2 rib, so it had to be divisible by 4. You'll see that in some cases I added 2 stitches for some of them, and then I didn't add any stitches for others. And that is because that is to make it divisible, because 88 is obviously divisible by 4. So then I had my total number of stitches, and then because I wanted a seam allowance, I added 2 more to all of the sizes across the piece. And that gave me the total of my cast on stitches. I would say about the seam allowances, it depends on how you're doing the design. Having been to lessons about finishing, like as in how you finish a garment, I think the majority of designers include selvage stitches, as they call them, or a seam allowance. That seems to be the general way of it. I've kind of picked that up over the years, and I'm going to include how I would finish the garment in the pattern as well, because I think that including nice finishing in your garment is it's important, because sometimes you see things that are beautifully finished in the sample, but if you don't finish them the same way, you won't get the same result. And that's my cast on stitches. Next thing then was I wanted to add a piece of rib. I'd already decided that I wanted it to be 2.5 inches of rib for all of the sizes. I don't know if that was a legitimate decision or not. It fits with the final lengths though. The next thing then is I wanted to work a piece in stocking stitch, and I wanted to work that straight. I used a measurement to calculate how many inches for that. You'll see that I have, where I make a decision, I should probably put decision in there as well. Where I make a decision, where I include a measurement, what I'm adding together, I try to put it in, excuse me, I try to put in a note to myself so that I remember later on, because before doing this walkthrough, I went back through it to add in some of those things, because I had forgotten what I had been doing. And it's really easy, particularly when if you work full time, like a lot of designers, as well as being designers, you come back to something and you have no idea what's going on. So the better your notes are, the better, the more easy it is to come in and out of it if you have to do that. So I then made a decision. So I used high hip to waist as the measurement. I calculated this because I don't have that in my sizing spreadsheet. So I used center back to high hip minus center back to waist, which makes sense because that is the high hip to waist is what you've left over. And then I averaged all of those out to be kind of between the sizes. Again, these are things you decide yourself, and you'll work out if the length works for you then as a final length. I then added them up. So my rib plus my stocking stitch is this number, my 2 for my measurement, and my 2.5 of the rib that I decided. And you can see now when you do that in Excel and you're in the formula, it'll update your formula. So if you click in here, it'll add anything you touch. You can see that that changes then as you go through the different cells, that it adds the different things. I calculated my centimeters then based on my inches. I don't know if that was the right way, but it's the bit that it's how it worked best for me. So then I had finished. So I'm now I have now identified the pattern for this piece. So I'm now going from here to here, have a rib, have a straight piece of stocking stitch. The next piece I'm going to work out then is I want to go from this point all the way out to here, which is the shaping to the start of the sleeve. And it's a little bit tricky in this garment because it's not a standard sleeve edition, but you're working out a portion of knitting to cover a part of the body, essentially. So I want the aim, and this is where I wanted to go. I knew I needed to get to this measurement. I knew I wanted to go from elbow, above the elbow to above the elbow. So essentially elbow to elbow. And I knew I had to get that much more width over that much more height. So I worked out what my width was going to be. And sometimes you have this. So if it was just a standard chest measurement, because you wanted to aim for a chest measurement, you would just add that in. Or if you were waist shaping, you would use the waist, the hips, and you would shape in and out between those. But because I'm doing kind of a non-standard one, I use chest plus armhole to waist multiplied by 2. Armhole to waist is, I don't have an elbow to elbow, so this is how I calculated it. If you put your arm down beside you, it's about to your waist. It's like, they work approximately. And a lot of measurements in a kind of a fluid kind of garment, they're what you decide they're going to be. So I use those. I used all my numbers from my spreadsheet. There's a whole selection of them. I use a formula, and then I round my formula out, because you can see in Excel it allows you to round. So I round out all my details. So my aim was to go, so this is where I deduct. So I say, right, I know that my width is 16, which is where I cast on, and I want to get to 33. And in order to do that, it means I need to increase 17 inches. That's what I need to do. I need to increase the piece 17 inches. I then decided, when I was knitting the sweat, when I was working out the numbers, you'll see if I remove these, you'll see that there's very little increase in that. So actually you don't really get the bat wing look of the sweater. So when I was doing those numbers, I put in 6 additional inches to make the scope below the elbow in the larger sizes. Was it the right thing to do? I don't know. But if you want a bat wing sweater over a certain size, you need to have more space to add your wings. So I added 6 inches to the sizes. It'll all be included. The notes on that will be included in the pattern. And I probably will do 2 versions eventually, where I give you the option for these sizes to have the additional 6 inches, and I have the option for these to not have the 6 inches. And thankfully, because this is a spreadsheet, I can add and take that out. But I decided this. So That means that in total then I want to increase this many inches from where I am starting at this point. Then I know I need to do those increases over this distance. So I then calculate this distance. I use the waist to armhole. I use a particular formula in that, but I'm deducting different things to get to it because I don't have that particular measurement in the spreadsheet. I round it down and it becomes 12. And then, so I now know that I need to increase Y inches in width over Z inches in height. I then check, I'm doing it here, I check the full length to the underarm from the cast on edge by adding up the different pieces. And I think that checking, and I've used a little yellow box in these just to mark for myself, where I'm saying, does this look right now? Before I keep going on and doing additional maths. It's just a precaution. So the next thing I now need to do is work out how many stitches I need to increase over how many rows. I use this formula for it. So again, it's one of Usalda's. It's a magic formula for evenly distributing shaping. And I have to say, my very first sample of the sweater, I didn't use this, and it just wasn't the same. So I would recommend looking at that and spending a little bit of time working that out. So what you do is it's how many rows. So I took the number of inches and multiplied it by the number of how many stitches. So the number of stitches by the number of inches tell me how many stitches I need to increase. And then I took the number of rows, which is the number of rows in my gauge, by the number of inches in height that I needed to increase. And I got this. So I need to increase 94 stitches over 84 rows, right? How many ever stitches you need over how many ever rows. I then, because I'm increasing, and this is a decision you make yourself, is how many increases are you doing per row? And I knew it was 2 because I'm increasing, you'll see here in the garment, I'm increasing on both sides. So I know that every row I increase, I'm increasing 2 stitches. So I divide the total number of increased stitches by 2. So I now know I need to do 47 increased rows in that many total rows. Then you divide them, and I rounded them. But this is where you need to understand the formula, because this is why that formula is magical. So it says that you have a higher rate and a lower rate of increases. The higher rate is higher than this number. The lower rate is below it. And that's how the formula works. Check it out. It's really neat. So I now know that I need to do 42. I need to increase every 2 rows 42 times. And then that gives me my 84 rows. And then I need to add some additional stitches in the next 5 rows to get to the total number of stitches. And there's a little bit of because what I've done is, in this I budget a little bit, that I add a small bit of extra rows into this size and this size, because I'm trying to increase too many rows, too many stitches in too few rows. And when I change to 4-ply, it's going to be a little bit more obvious, but I think for these 2 smaller sizes, I'll be okay with my few extra rows. Then I have my total number of stitches after the increases. So check out that formula and get your head around that, because it's super useful. Then I do a width check. How wide is my garment going to be? And this is the total width divided by the number of stitches in my gauge. And that again is just that check, does that feel right? So because the elbow to elbow is a made up number, essentially a calculation I've done, I check that on myself. It's not a huge variation in that across the sizes. Before I added the 6 inches, they're quite close. And again, weight doesn't really influence your elbow to elbow measurement, if that makes sense. And then it was sleeves. So I'm now here, gotten myself to this point on my schematic, and I know I need to get from there to there. I use a measurement. I use side depth, which is one of Usalda's, and that is essentially from the top of the shoulder to your armhole. I use that. I round it, and then I know I need to work straight. So for this many inches in stocking stitch, that many centimeters. And that's pretty neat. Like that's it. And then I know that I'm going to do a 3-needle cast off, but I'm going to include that in the pattern because that's irrelevant. The numbers are irrelevant to that piece of finishing. And then I do a few checks. So I check, this is the measurement center back. So I actually pull that in from the spreadsheet. And then this is the test body length. So you can see me, I am dividing by 7. You see, I should have actually put in, that should be rows. It's rather than being a 7, as you can see. So for example, let me show you. So if I put in the word rows there, press enter, and copy this across, it should give you all the same numbers. I'm copying and pasting, by the way, as I do this. It's now been corrected to rows rather than a 7. I was lazy. And this compares them then to the full hip. And this is why doing a bit of a check. So this is an actual measurement taken from my sizing. And this is the measurement that my gauge is telling me it's going to be. So I know that I am not that far out, and I can take the variance in it. If I came to this point and it was way too short, I would need to do a small bit of recalculation. Also, using center back to full hip is because I'm using a particular neckline as well on this. If you had, say, a longer neck on it, you'd need to think about that in the length as well. So once I got to that point, I knew I cast on my sample and worked from there. And it was during that, then when I was doing the sample, I decided how I was going to do the neck. So in this, I knew I was going to do I used the back of the neck measurement, and then I added 2 inches on each side of the neck, because I knew I wanted quite an open neck. Again, something I decided. And this gives you how much is the total neck space. So it's the 2 figures, so it's neck plus what I wanted myself. Then I work out the stitches that'll be taken into the neck, then the total number of stitches, which I take from up here. I know I need to cast that many off on each side to allow me this between them. So for example, that is 62 stitches get cast off. This is 66 get cast off. This is my 52. And then this is 66 again, and that's your total number of stitches. So I need to cast off that as a 3-needle cast off, cast that off, and it leaves me with this. And then later on, I know that when I'm doing my I-cord cast off, I know how many stitches I have left because I double that, because it's obviously for the 2 sides of your neck space. And that was really where I got to this point. Then that's all of your grading numbers done by size. And then I was able to take it down here. And what I'm doing here is I'm just making sure that I have my schematics. So I have A, B, C, and D on my schematic. And this is my inches, sizes, and this is my centimeters. And that is the grade. Is it right? I don't know. I'll come back and I'll tell you after I have the tech edit. I do another thing after this then, so that's the grading. What I did then for my own self, and because I use Excel a lot, is I then concatenate my figures against the pattern description. You do not have to do this. You can write your pattern and then copy and paste your numbers in from the spreadsheet. I just happen to like doing this. I then copy all of this into Word, and it allows me to make the numbers update. Now, before you do that, make sure your numbers are right in Excel or you'll be copying the same error through them. I like it. It's worked for me. I want this sweater to be, I want to be able to do this as a 4-ply. So, for example, I want to be able to do it as, say, my gauge is my 7 stitches to 9 rows. I want it to be able to feed right down through my pattern pretty quickly, and kind of do the maths that way. We'll see how that works. I'll undo that very quickly now in case I save it. That's why spreadsheets are so useful. Anyway, so that was that. And I copy them, and you can see they're concatenating all the numbers from above. And then my different increase sizes and where I need to work a certain number of rows, etc. Working your sleeves and making up. And then you just pull your numbers in, and I can actually see errors in this already, which is the danger of using concatenation. I'm missing my commas between my numbers. That'll be one of the things that go back to the tech edit. And then I come down here and I put my finishing in, etc. Now, the next thing, and I wasn't going to show you this actually, but since I have it done, this is my yarn calculation. Yarn calculation gives me the heebie-jeebies because I never want anyone to run out of yarn, but I also don't want people to buy too much yarn. And I did so I worked this out. I took the whole area. So the way they do it is they tell you to calculate the whole area of the piece. So for example, this would be C by B to give you the whole area of the piece that it covers, multiplied by 2 because you have 2 sides. And then you take your swatch and you divide your swatch into it. So if I have my swatch is this big here, like a little tiny square, I then divide my tiny square into all of these and I work out how many of those there are in that. Yeah, but my problem with this was that I have these big spaces here where I know I have no use. So what I did was I took the width at the widest point, multiplied by the length at the longest point, and then I took away the space that I know. So I took away these. The first thing I did was I took away this, and then I took away this as well on one side. So I took away this square 4 times from both sides and from the back and front. And then I took away this triangle above it, this bit, from one side, so that I had my kind of my extra just in case 10% that they add. So this is my remove this bit and remove this bit. So the square inches I need to cover then are those. So that is the total size minus bits I know where there is definitely no yarn. Then my swatch was 6 inches by 7 inches and it was 18 grams. So it's 42 inches squared, it's 18 grams. So then I divide my 18 by 42 to get 1 inch squared, which is 0.4 grams per inch squared. I then divide the inches squared that need to be covered by the amount of yarn per inch squared to get a total. I added 10% and then worked out how many balls that needed to be. It was interesting because I was able to check, because I had knit the 42, I was able to check how much I needed, and I was a little bit up, but I was about a half ball bigger. And this is something I'm talking to Deb as the tech edit goes on, is how do you make sure you have enough, but you're not making people buy extra yarn? And then I have my final one, and then I use this in the pattern. So this is the size, this is the number of skeins of the yarn that it's met. This is yards and meters because you want people to be able to substitute yarn. So I don't want to just include the number of skeins. I want to be able to use yards and meters as well so that people can substitute them. So these are notes to my down here below. This are some of the notes I want to share about designing patterns, but I'll share those later. And that's it. So I did all of that in Excel. You know what, when I look at the sweater, it's such a simple thing, but it seemed to take ages, and it's hard to justify, but it took me a little while. I had to have a couple of goes at this to make sure I had what the right things were. I'm pleased. I've no idea if it's right. We're going to go for tech edit. So it's gone for tech edit. And once it comes back, then I'll be going off for test knit. And that's it. We'll see how it goes on actual human beings who may use different yarns and all that kind of thing, which I think would be great. Yeah, sorry about the amming. I'm not sure what to say at the end of this. And that's it, my first sweater grade. I hope that's useful. If you have any questions, just you could probably, the best place to find me is the Facebook group to ask me questions, so TLYC Knit and Netter, or you can send me an email. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. And hopefully I'll be sharing the updates I make after the tech edit as well. Thank you.